Good morning to all our listeners. Good afternoon to all our listeners in the different regions of the world. This is the South Sudan Women Intellectual Forum, and today we will be discussing gender and climate change. The aim of our discussion is to broaden people's understanding of the impacts of climate change and gender, and how do we as people in South Sudan deal with the different impacts, as well as what are the solutions or what are the different mitigation measures that we can take. With me in the room is Nianton Hothmai, Miss Nyamaj Hoth, and we have an extra member of our crew who will be joining us soon. First off, I would like us to start with introductions. So I'm going to go over to Nyathon, give a brief introduction about you before we move on to Nyama. Welcome. May you unmute yourself, please? Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you, Census, and thank you to all our viewers, wherever you are in all your respective locations, and to South Sudan Women Intellectual Forum for creating this platform. My name is Nianton Hothmai. I am an energy and climate change expert, and I am a program officer at the Sud Institute in the Department of Human Resource Department. We can
Thank
hear.
you very much, Nyathon. Great to have you here. Miss Nyamaj, please give us a brief introduction.
All right. Thank you, Census. My name is Nyamai Hothmai. I'm an environmentalist, founder of Future Savers Network, and I also work for Nile Petroleum Corporation as section head for safety in the HSC department, Health, Safety, and Environment Department.
And I am Census Kabanglo Leong. I have worked for a while in the field of environment, climate change, as well as wildlife management. I am also a host of Africa Day Club on the Clubhouse Media, and I am happy to have all of you here. If any of you have comments or questions to ask, please write it in the chat and we will see how to answer them. First off, I am going to start with a brief understanding of the different terms. And our main terms are really looking at gender as well as what is climate change. To have an understanding of gender, I would like to ask Ms. Nyama to give us a definition, define gender, if you may, and define it in a way that is also understandable to our people in South Sudan. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. We have heard this word often every day, gender, gender equality, and everything's about gender. And actually, as I was posting about this issue, many people inboxed me, many people, they were like, when you say gender, they just think of women. Of course, they said, you guys are just talking about women. So gender in its simplest definition is, it refers to how the characteristic of an individual based on their sex, either female or a male. That will be your gender. But now there's so much difference between gender and sex. Gender is actually based on social construct, or it's socially constructed or psychologically constructed to be a woman or to be a man, while sex, it determines biologically. That's in the simplest term that we can understand.
I wanted to add, if while we're waiting for Neil.
Yes, please come through. You are.
Yeah, I think Yamad, you've done an amazing job in terms of defining what gender is. And to add, if I may add to what you just say about gender, for me, how I understand gender, our society is somehow naturally divided into binary system, and what it means, we are divided when there's female and there's male, right? Biologically, that is what is determined. And that's what we define sex, right? We are divided according to our sex. We are either male or we are either female. On the other hand, society have gone ahead further and assigned certain roles, norms, and relation based on our biological division of what either you're a male or you're a female. And this is where the term now gender comes in, because gender is what we society constructed to what it means to be a female and what it means to be a man. For example, in South Sudan, being a woman, for example, like your role primarily is to take care of kids, is for you to cook, you to fetch water, and you're collecting firewood. On the other hand, the man role has been given that they are the breadwinner and they're the protector of the family, right? So these are role we society assigned on ourselves. This is not biological role that were given to us. The same thing in terms of relations. How do men and women, how do female and men relate? And what is the power structure of these two? Society determined that. And what are some of the norms? How do I as a woman behave, and how does Niall as a man behave within, or how does a boy and a girl behave? So in simple terms, we are, we are born and we grow to be boys and girls, and then we grow to be men and women based on this on the role society given us. So being a woman and a man is what society constructed, but being female and being male is what our biology constructed. And just to add what Nimai has said.
Okay, thank you very much. And of course, we know nowadays there are other terms that are gender fluid, where a person is not defined by the sex they're given at birth, but rather one they believe they are. So thank you for that definition.
Yes.
And
Yes.
one of our other, would you like to add something?
Yeah. I thought we were coming for the role of gender after, because I thought it was just the definition. What I was to say in the gender role is what Nianton has said already. And we know in our society, we know, except we have transgenders, which are actually abnormalities. But naturally, we have the two types of sex. But now this gender issue or gender roles is actually an ideology, or these are attitudes. I say that they're actually meant by the society. You know, how you're expected to dress, how you're expected to speak as a woman or as a male, how you're expected to act. You know, we have seen last year how a girl was thrown into dirty water in Rumbek because she was wearing a trouser. Because in South Sudan, they think if you put on a trouser, it's only male or men who are supposed to put on a trouser. We have seen Nianton and I went to Malakal in 2007 and rang, and we have seen women being beaten or girls being beaten because of wearing trousers. We almost fell victim of that, but we were lucky enough not to be caught by those guys. You see, but it's not bad to wear trousers. We are all wearing trousers nowadays, you know. So that these ideologies, they actually fall into three categories. We have traditional ideology, which actually reflects the perspective of roles, being a male or a female, and you have to be, if you are a male, you're actually given the livelihood responsibilities, and if you're a female, you're given the domestic roles, in which nowadays is not the case. You know, we have seen now, we have women who are in the front line, you know, and it was never to be. We have women who are generals now, but traditionally you cannot. We have an aunt who is a chief, you know, and before, traditionally, there's no woman who can be a chief. So we have the traditional ideology, we have the transitional ideology, which lies in between, and we have the egalitarian ideology, which actually doesn't agree with the traditional that the roles have to be segregated based on our gender or based on our sex. But the transitional is just in between, you know. We are transiting actually from tradition, but we haven't reached the other point. So these are the things I wanted to add, and on gender based. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Nyamash, for bringing that forward. And to all our listeners, I want to also have all of you understand that we believe anyone who has chosen their identity and that's what they believe in, we shall accept them as so. Next, I'm going to move over to Nyal. Nyal is one of our other team members. Nyal, I would like to give a brief introduction and perhaps just dive into a definition of climate change. And may you unmute yourself, please? Thank you. Unmute yourself, please. Niall, we can't hear you because your mic is not on. May you please switch on your mic? Thank you very much. Welcome.
Okay, sorry, I was a bit late. I actually confused the time because we are in the Central African time, and I think the time was mentioned as 5 East African, which is basically 4 here in South Sudan. But good enough, I was earlier enough in my destination for this show. So they started, happen, when I was away. So, but I am sure I will be able to catch up. So first of all, let me just add something about gender, because it's gender and climate change, and why does it matter?
Perhaps you would like to give a brief introduction of who you are or what you do.
Okay, good. So I'm Nianton Hothmai. Currently, I'm with UNHCR on leave from the Soup Institute, where I have actually been working as the director of the Environment and Natural Resource Program. That's about me. And I focus on climate change, environment, and energy. Thank you.
All right, welcome. You can give a brief definition of climate change, and I see you want to tie it straight into gender, so that's okay.
Okay, good. So maybe, my definition will come within the context of gender, because, this gender is socially constructed. Of course, there is a biological aspect of gender, as mentioned by Nianton earlier, but most of it is basically socially constructed. So these are, gender is basically about the roles that we assign to men, women, what they can do, how we perceive them, how they should behave, what they should do in terms of the domestic roles or in terms of public roles, basically. So this is all about gender. And of course, when we now bring it to climate change, and we discussed climate change, I think, in our previous shows, and I think defining it, I think, is not bad for people who are not familiar with climate change. And last time we said climate change is the change in the average weather condition over an extended period of time, which normally go up to 30 years or more, where if a location has been experiencing a normal climatic condition, let's say rainfalls, on average 1,000 meters of rainfalls in that location, and then it starts to change in terms of the average amount of rainfall, that will be considered as climate change, or the frequency of the flooding, whether it is, it's happening every year and it never used to happen. But, the reason why it concerns gender is that with different roles that are assigned, with these different capabilities, different gender will be affected. Gender will be affected differently. Men and women will be affected differently because of the climatic shocks that are being experienced. So let's say if all of us are relying on agriculture, and it's all about capability. And in fact, I see all the issues related to climate change impacts in terms of the capability. And the capability, usually we define this in terms of the skills that you have and the assets that each of us possess. And when it comes to gender, it is about the skills and the assets and the opportunities that each gender, has. So whether men and women have access to all these, and in most cases in South Sudan, which is a very poor country, a country that is at the lowest literacy rate in the world, it's the women who are always affected. Because, and why does it matter for climate change? It matters in the sense that if people are displaced and in your home area, you have been relying on natural resources like farming, what happens is that you are displaced and you are relying on farming, and then your livelihood is basically affected by weather conditions. And in most cases, it is women who are relying on natural resources or rain-fed agriculture and who are affected in this sense. Now you are displaced. If you don't have skills to go to a new place and rely on, so if you are well-educated and you were a farmer who was well-educated, you can also go and actually use your skills as a teacher to teach. You can go and use your skills if you were a lawyer to go and work as a lawyer somewhere else. So the impacts of climate change is severe in really underdeveloped countries like ours because of lack of capabilities, lack of opportunities, and it is the worst among women because in South Sudan, women have the lowest literacy rate. In South Sudan, actually, the overall literacy rate actually is 27%, and women basically have 12% of that. And so that's why it's a real concern. So when we zoom in on gender, how men and women are affected by climatic shocks, it's all about so that you can program for different gender. But if we just say blanketly and we generalize and say, okay, we will program, and you are not focusing on how men and women are affected and how their opportunities are affected, then some of the people will basically be left out. And in most cases, it will be the women and children that are going to be left out because their opportunities are the ones that are affected by climate change because they rely on, in most cases, on grain-fed agriculture, on natural resources, on water, which basically is affected by drought, which is basically, the hazard in most cases when it is flooding. Thank you very much. I think I have extended beyond what was required. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As well as connecting the two. You and I would like you to, the impacts related to assets, it's, all of the various impacts that on gender and South Sudan, how people even interact. Nianton, can you hear me?
I don't know if it's only on my side, but your voice is very slow, so I'm not hearing you very well.
Can you hear me now?
So I can hear the question is dragging, but it's fine. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think it's fine. I can hear your question is dragging, but I can hear your question.
Continue.
Okay. Thank you so much, Niall. I think Niall have dived in and he has really brought very important question when it comes to the link between climate change and gender. And I think what Niall has mentioned is the fact that, skills is very important, and also the capacity in terms of having resources to be able to cope during the impact of climate change. For example, if there's drought or if there's flooding. But I want to go back and I really want to sort of get us back to the agenda a little bit and try to understand why are these the case? Why are women not having enough skills to be able to cope to the impact of climate change? And I think I just want us to sort of really relate back to when we talk of the gender roles and when we talk of the norms, and then in terms of relation and how these each component interact with the impact of climate change. And I've mentioned examples of how, as a society, and thank you, Census, just before I go there, thank you for mentioning being gender and being male, of course, right? This is the dominant, what people think, but then at the same time, there are exceptions to where the individuals who don't define themselves in certain way as society are constructed. And I think it's something that we all accept and respect regardless of how somebody sees themselves. And so I think when it comes to the role, is that society has divided roles, as I said before, and especially when it comes to, let's say, a South Sudanese household, and more relevant to actually the rural setting area, where women are very much involved in collection of fetching water and collecting firewood. And we know, just to give even a statistics, it says that 85% of women collect water compared to 5% of men in a household. So this is basically the responsibility of women to fetch water and go and collect firewood and cook. So where these roles interact with the climate change is the fact that the availability of water is affected by the impact of climate change. And we know, as Neil has said, some of the impact of climate change is that it leads to drought, right? Where now we have, less water than we normally get in terms of rainfall. And sometimes women are forced to walk long distance to go and fetch, to go and find water so that they can provide that to their family, because it is our role to make sure that the family has water to bathe, to wash, and to cook, and to do everything our responsibility. So you see the link between the climate change here and the role of gender being the cook. The other role as well is firewood, especially, and then as well, especially when there is flooding as well. What flooding does is that we lose access to clean water that is closer to us. So still, women have to walk long distance to make sure they go to drier place to collect firewood, or go to a longer place to go and collect and find clean water. On the other hand, society said that men are the breadwinners, and men are the cattle keepers, right? They're the one that who take care of goats, cattle. And what happens during flood is that men are forced to make sure they take the cattle to dry areas, right? While women remain with the children. And so we've seen the art of cattle keeping is very much related to the impact of climate change, because if there's flood, these people must move. So they walk long distance to make sure they take their cattle to dry areas. And here, men are more likely to be in conflict with the farming community. And we've seen example of where the cattle keepers are coming in conflict with the farmers. So in here, if we say men are more likely to be killed or to die or whatever because of they're forced out of by the event of climate change, and now there's conflict, and who are to be involved in conflict, because our society say that the men are protectors. So the men will always be the front line when there's conflict, right? So men are more likely to be involved in conflict more than women. So the second aspect is that we've talked about our norms. Our norms basically is how our society suspect us men and women to behave in certain, and as well what value we put either on men or female, or men and women. And what we have seen is that it is the expectation for us, for women are more expected, right, to, as Nyamai said before, to be at home, right? Woman, your role is at home, is in the kitchen. You're supposed to provide these productive roles in the house. And especially when now it comes to girls, right? Girls as well are expected to make sure they're involved in the kitchen. They do things when boys are different. So what happens with these norm is the fact that the time that the girls, because they're children, they're supposed to be involved in education, right? But most of the time, these girls, and even now in the case in South Sudan, a girl is very likely to miss school because she has to help her mother. She has a responsibility she has to do at home. So that means girls have less time of attending school compared to their counterpart, which are boys, right? Because boys, it's the society value that boys are smarter, right? And they are to be involved and they're supposed to go to school. As well, we value if we have resources and I have little as a parent, my decision is I'm going to take that money and put it on the boy, invest in them, because do you know why? They are the investment of the family. The girl is going to be married off, right? The husband is working for her somewhere to go take care of her. So these norms that we assign to ourselves already determined our future or the outcome of who we are when we become women, because we are expected when you are, when you're married, right? Your husband is supposed to take care of you. And that means, as Neil said before, we have less skills to be able to involve in outside activity than what we only know what we do in the house. So we don't have skills that we can sell outside there to make sure we bring an extra income, right? And also because the household chores take a lot of our time, we don't even have more time to go outside and and involve in economic activity that will bring you reward. So already, if you've seen as well, the norms and expectation we put on our women sort of bring different outcomes to boys and girls and who we are as become men and women. Of course, there are some some family that are exceptional, that do value girls as boys. But if we see in majority of what our community are, our society put more premium on boys and men and on girls and women. So even as well, it goes as well to the power relation in terms of our decision making in our household, right? In our household, we know that decision basically rely on our man counterpart. Even being a woman, because our society say men are the decision maker in the in our house. The same thing as well in the community. You go to community events or community meetings and stuff. Most of those things are being dominated by men, and as well, those has as well goes as far as even at the national level, where now women are fighting for the 25% to make sure that as well women should be represented in political participation. So what is happening when women are not on the table when community issues or family issues or national issues are being discussed is the fact that women voices are being left out. So when it comes to climate change, now we know that for us to adapt to climate change and mitigation, of course, there have to be programs, there have to be policies, there have to be laws that need to be implemented to make sure that we adapt to climate change. But we know in a society where one gender voices is very likely to be not heard. So there's very much likely that the program or the law, the policies that will be made, their voices and their concerns and their ideas will not make it. So it will be one gendered. And they'll be very likely that policy will not consider the experiences of women, their concerns, their needs, because the other gender will not understand if I am to talk of what I'm going through. So this is where now our gender roles, norms, and relation is really interacting on how we are adapting to climate change.
For bringing that forward and tied in the part of resource conflict, because that's a very big Nyamaj, I think from to look deep, right? We have those in cattle that value resources differently as well, while within agrarian community, everyone goes to the farm. You know, roles that they play, they are also expected. I want you to dive into that and try and extract the different impacts that. Thank you.
Oh. All right, I didn't get all your voice is cutting. It's not that clear, but I can add into, as we are still discussing on the impact of climate change on gender or women, and basically we are talking of women that they are mostly affected by climate change. Nianton talk of most of them and also Nian. I also want to add that in the face of climate change, there is an aspect that is always left behind, that during this time is women and girls who get malnourished. Because of our traditions, women have to cook, they have to bring the food to the men and the other children. And actually, because these resources are scarce, you'll find that they didn't have anything to eat, or something. So in the course, it makes them become malnourished or even die of some diseases because they didn't eat or they starve actually. And during climate change, also gender-based violence intensifies. Talking of evacuating people, we have many people who have been displaced, the IDPs, their incomes. That one leads to a lot of, like, women will not have safety, even privacy in terms of sanitation. So because people are in the same place. As we said also, Nianton mentioned earlier about traveling long distances to go and look for these scarce resources such as firewood and water. Women go through a lot. In the long way to go and look for water, they get raped, they get they are attacked by wild animals. Some of them get killed. Some of them, as they reach the water places, get stung by snakes and other things. So these are also things that are added to the impact of climate change on women. We have girls during such times, because of the economic problems that the families will face, they turn to marry them off also, so that, because they consider girls as the source of income. When they are married, the family will have some wealth. So that one lead into early marriages or forced marriages, which also lead them and deprive them from getting their education, that further reduces their capabilities of getting these skills and getting education, which will make us be part of decision making. So climate change affect women in so many aspects. In all our aspect of life, women are actually affected by climate change. Talking to these roles of women being in farmland, I know for the nomads, we have people who are nomads who are moving from one place to another. Women also are involved in this issue of cattle keeping. You know, they move and women goes to farmlands. I didn't understand the question well because her voice was breaking. But women, I've seen in this side of, like, let's talk of central Equatorial or Equatorial region in general, where most of people are farmers. You know, we see women are their day and day activities. They're home taking care of the family, but they're also in the farmlands where they help in providing planting crops for supporting the family. We have seen men, they will go for gathering, you know, instead of going to the farms, they go to gather some places where they're going to take their local brew, maybe aragi or merisa abiat, you know, we talk of that. And you'll find them having or playing, you know, some games that they normally play somewhere where they're gathered. And this responsibility of farming is also left to women. And you'll find the women are the one who are in farmlands most of the time. So this one also affects. And when climate change comes, you'll find women are left with little choices, you know, to get these crops for their families so that they can provide for them. This one will take them now even to look for wild crops like weeds, like those of amaranthus, which will actually grow in the wild. And this one take them also to go and look for these crops in far places when there are droughts or when there are floods. And yeah, so the question wasn't that clear, but what I just got, this is what I gave. I couldn't hear you well. Census, back to you.
Okay, can you hear me now? Can or not? You can't hear me?
So we can hear it's dragging.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dragging.
That's okay.
I don't know what is going on.
So it's your earpieces.
I've removed the ear. Is it
Okay.
still the same?
Yeah, still the same. Still the same.
If I am having such issues, I think I'm going to have to lean on you to and take some of this space in asking questions.
So, okay. So I think Niall, I don't know, Niall, I think Census, if I may understand your question that you posted to Nyamite, was about agriculture, climate change, and women. Yes, okay. So I don't know, Niall, if you want to say something about that, and then I can add something, or okay. Okay, so let me comment, and then Niall, you can add your point. So I think when it comes to agriculture, we know that majority of women actually rely on subsistence when it comes to agriculture, and also women, of course, do the most of farming. I don't know how true that is. If people can argue, but it's something we've heard a lot. Our women are the one who does a lot of farming. So what happens was that because agriculture is very directly impacted by the impact of climate change, and I just want to sort of remind people when we talk of the impact of climate change, we are talking about drought and we are talking about flooding, as we've just seen. So what happened during flooding, of course, our agriculture, our produce, right? We lose all our farm products, and these expose most of these women to hunger because the flood has destroyed their crops and also the drought. So this is how I see the link of how agriculture and the women and climate change are come in contact.
Okay. So I go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it's the roles, having implications for how men and women are affected. I think this one is very clear. And in our case in South Sudan, the role are still very traditional anyway. So we are not a liberal society. We are still very conservative. And the fact that certain roles are more exposed, like I think we have explained this clearly earlier. I think what we need to actually look into is, we know this because we live in this society. So whatever that we have talked about, we know it. But I think where we need to actually pay attention to now is for some sort of evidence-based analysis on the extent to which different gender actually participating in each of all these activities, livelihood activities. We know women are much involved. In fact, in agro-pastoralist societies that are cattle keepers and farmers at the same time, like the Nuer, the Dinka, and others that are also doing these dual roles. I think women mostly are the ones who actually stay at home and they do the farming in most cases, while the men are actually taking care of the livestock. But of course, in agrarian societies, communities that are basically crop farmers, it's I think it's both jobs. But I think the more important part of this is it's what I said earlier, which is the capabilities, the diversification of livelihood skills and opportunities and assets. Because even if all genders are basically exposed equally, the fact that if you are relying on one thing, and this is the problem with climate change, because climate change affects countries differently, and it's all about the capacity of the people, the women, the men, and everybody involved in there. And so when we talk about climate change, affecting more women than men, is because of the capabilities and the capacity and the access to opportunities, and the exposure, to risk. For example, in 2020, when I went to Bor, when people were displaced from areas in the Greater Bor, people moved to Bo Town, people moved to Mangala to cross the river to Minkaman. What happened is that most people that I found there were basically women and children, and where were the men? They moved. They already escaped early in the season, by the way, because people know they have a way to know traditionally. Of course, people who live close to nature, they have their own indicators on knowing that flood is going to come, and so they men migrated earlier enough in June, July 2020. Already the cattle were already here south of Juba, and women and children, they remain, and elderly basically. They remain at home, and so these were the categories which were actually affected. And so when also, that brings me to another category, which is very important, the elderly, whether men and women, they are also vulnerable and they are exposed, because they cannot move. They are dependent on others for livelihoods, basically. And so in most cases, the population, if you see my pictures that time, it's women, children, and the elderly, like older people, men and women who are old. And they strong. And even the girls, actually, they move with their brothers, with the cattle. And so this is how we look at it. And in societies that are, depending on crops only, when you also find people are also displaced, they are destroyed, and they move away to higher grounds, to places where they go and rely. But what happens there is that they just go and rely on humanitarian assistance, basically. And in most cases, you will find people, even when you go to these IDP camps, which are mostly people who are displaced from Mangala or other places, you will also find it's mostly women and the elderly, and the strong are not there. So you see the impact in this case. And so when we zoom in like this, it's actually to really design the adaptation measures to these particular demographic group, so that we design, programs, basically. And also the other part is that when people are left in the villages, because the village has been affected by flood and the animals have no place to graze, women, they also remain. And when the attack comes, it is the women who are mostly affected. Like last Sunday, when the place in Biden was attacked, like that village was basically, and you could see the name of people who were killed. There were children, there were women there among them. It's because the strong men are not there in the village. They have migrated to town. They move away with cattle to Equatoria. And these are places, communities that are affected by basically the flood of the last 3 years. So I think we have considerably actually covered all these issues, and I think where we need to focus is actually how to design programs to meet the needs of different demographic groups, and mainstreaming the mainstream gender needs into the climate change adaptation and mitigation programs in South Sudan, which is something that I think needs to be done in terms of, as I said earlier, analyzing the extent to which different groups are affected, having the data. Like I know last time, what we did last time was basically race-based. But I think this time is actually to really go on the ground and be able to really zoom in and find the impacts of this on the ground. But what we are talking about now is what we have been observing, like I said, observing in Bor when the people were being displaced in Mangala, and look at the population of people who are there. It's mostly women and children and the elderly. And so going forward with more changes, drastic changes coming, with high rise in temperatures, with frequency and the severity of droughts and floods, it means that these demographic groups are going to be affected even more. And if we don't have a policy plan and everything in place, it's going to be basically catastrophic, to say the least.
Yeah. Just to add to what you said, I think there's one of the viewer who has asked the question: what is the link between climate change and early marriage? And I think, as Niall has said, in South Sudan at this point, there's literally small research in any of the topic we are discussing here. So most of the things these are observation we see around us as community, but if there's one recommendation as well that we need to get out of here later, actually, is we need research to look into this issue. But from what literature says, is that early marriage is connected, of course, is the tradition, is the custom, but at the same time, the rate at how it's happening at this point in the world, there's poverty aspect attached to it, right? Because, of course, society, girls are, it used to be a symbol of appreciation where dowry, right, were paid. But somehow I feel that some society and some family now are using girls as an exit out of poverty, or their way to sort of cope with their poverty. And what climate change does is that exacerbate the factor that make family or even community more poor, because climate change takes away the coping mechanism people have, or the little assets they have, so that they can sustain themselves. So the only assets that family would have, if you have girls, is to find suitable husband, regardless of what is the outcome of that girl, but to make sure that they pay dowry. And if you've seen how much family ask for the dowry of this girl at this point, you see is a pure exploitation, and basically this has become a business. And for me, I think the driving factor behind this is poverty, because family are finding a different way of how they can cope with poverty. Of course, there are other factors like economic, political, that are as well contributing to the poverty that the community are facing. But this is how I see climate change basically exacerbating the factors we are facing. And now the more our resource and coping mechanism are taken away, the next closest thing that can help family are girls if they can be married by suitable men. So this is how I see early marriage could be connected to climate change. I don't know if any of you want to add.
Maybe can I add
Yes,
something?
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, I think that is a very good question. So when you marry a young girl before finishing school, you are denying that young girl skills and life skills and capabilities. As I mentioned earlier, this issue of climate change affecting people is all about lack of capabilities. Because you can move anywhere and you just start a new life if you are educated. Like all of us here, we are from the villages that are now affected by floods. But we cannot be there in those villages. We cannot be in the displaced camps because we are educated. So if you educate a girl, that girl cannot be affected in the same way. But if you marry off that girl, it means two things. That girl will have no skills for life, for the rest of her life. Even if that girl is married to an educated person, it means the income for the person is going to come from one direction. But if that girl is educated, it means the income for the family is going to be double. And this is the benefit that we are not seeing from, ensuring that girls go to school. They finish school, at least high school or university or technical schools, so that they have skills. And then when they are married, they will be able to actually rely on their own. So when women are to be married, not to go and rely on husbands, and this is what actually it has to be some sort of ideological orientation for our people to be able to understand the fact that the reason why our society is behind is because we have no capacity, and the capacity comes with education. And so if we are marrying earlier, whether you are marrying a girl earlier, or even the man that is getting married before you finish university, it's just you are actually killing your capacity. So you have to develop first. I was listening to this Indian philosopher. I'm sure you may be familiar with him. He was saying, he was just advocating against earlier marriage. And he was saying, the Indian farmers, what they do is that what they do, that when the mango, the first few flowers, the farmer will cut off the first few flowers and just ignore that. The next year, cut off those few flowers. The third year, you will allow the mango to blossom and now mature and produce mango fruits. And the lesson is that if you marry off a girl earlier before, it means that you are just cutting before maturity. Like you are just cutting that mango before maturity. You are just starting to exploit the mango before maturity. And he says the mango, when you don't start earlier, it produces mature, high quality mangoes. It's the same thing with human beings. You have to develop education for development that brings our potential out. And so how this is how I see the linkage between climate change and early marriage. It means that those girls are going to be affected more by disasters, climate disasters.
Is it clear now?
Your voice still cutting.
Can any of my goodness?
Still slow.
Okay.
It's still slow. Can I add just something on that question? Hello.
Yes, Nyama,
Can you
go
hear
ahead.
me?
Yes.
Yes.
So now, since I'll be
you're the moderator.
Yeah, I'll be co-moderator now. So guys, allow me if I'm picking.
Yes. All right. That question is actually a very brilliant question that would bring another discussion, as Nianton said, and it should be a subject of research. But I think with observation, climate change is not different from times of war and other conflicts. whatever happened during the time of conflicts is the same thing that happened during the time of climate change. As we had in our home, we have floods since 2019. We have seen many people, they are called IDPs. The same time when we have war, we also have IDPs, internally displaced people. And when people are internally displaced, that means they have lost their homes, they have lost their properties, they have lost everything that they had, including if they had money, especially in the rural setting. And this one lead, like when we were in Khartoum during those days, we have seen many girls being married to people from America, people from Australia. You know, you're very small, very young, haven't even finished primary school, but somebody will come who is not even of your age, and you are forced. Either you might even be, she might even be above 18, which is okay. That will not be early marriage, but it will be forced marriage because the family will call you and tell you, look, we don't have anything. You have small sisters, siblings who are here, and we are not able to care for them, for their food or even their school. So what we are going to do is, you, when you go there, you're going, actually, the husband will support the family. In that case, that's already, a forced marriage. You don't want it, but you're forced. Or you are still very young and you're also forced to marry this person just to take care of the family, maybe to help in resettling the family. This case is still the same case as climate change. When we're having climate catastrophe or climate, problem during the times of floods and droughts, girls are also forced because the family loses everything. During droughts, you lose cattle, you lose everything that you have, crops failure, So the family is left with no choice. And if somebody who is well off comes to the family and he wants to say that I want to marry this girl, obviously the girl will be married off. And this one will be a cause, it's be a result of the impact of climate change on the economic status of the family. So that one, I see there's a direct link, but still we have to research and see. But we actually, from observation, climate change tragedies is not different from the times of conflict and other natural disasters.
Okay, I think our next question will be on the local solution, and census will come back. Will come to how is the how can we change relying on agriculture and also on cattle keeping. But I just want to, I don't know if one of you want to comment on that. How do we shift away from pastoral migration? What's the question exactly? How do we change the reliance on natural resources from pastoral migration to farmers? Right? That's the question.
To pasture farming.
Farming.
Farming. Yeah. No, pasture house in one huge farm and you move the different place within the same farm.
All right. It's how do we move from just the single pastoral farming? That's the question, Nianton, if I didn't get the question well.
Yes, I think census, you've written the question, so let's leave that. We'll come back on that. So I think let's move to what do we have? Do we have any local solution to some of the issues that we raise? Right, we've talked of the issue of gender and gender roles, norms, and how that bring inequality, and how we've seen that is being exacerbated by the impact of climate change. So what are the local solutions, do we think, that can strengthen, or how do we approach the impact of climate change on gender, both in men and women? I'll start, just make one comment, and then I'll move to Niall and then Nyamaj. I think for me, the local solution for me, I look at the household level. This is where we need to start, and this is where a lot of decisions are made. There's a lot of roles are assigned, and this is where we are punished to make sure that we abide by the society norms, right? Because we want to say that we raise respected children that are respected by the society. So I think I look at it this way, and we've seen gender roles play a huge impact in terms of consuming a lot of girls and women time, right? And because most of the household chores are primarily left on the hands of women. And it's easier for women to fall back on their girls to make sure that it helps them. And now we're in a society where we live in an extended family where it's not just about nuclear families, only you, your husband, and your children. Basically, it's do with the whole clan or the whole community, almost like living with you. And having one person is not possible for that person to provide because it takes a lot of your time. So I feel that our society, we really need to redefine and make it acceptable that if a house is full of 50 men, right, those men need to be productive as well at home. You just only don't rely on the one woman or the one girl that's at home to cook, to clean, to do everything, because that's what their life will be like. While the rest of their family members, because that's not their role, they're not going to help. So it's actually encouraging men and women to say that it's okay, like women need help, lean in, help them in the house, take some of responsibility. I don't think it's bad to help somebody to get water, to get, and so that we lessen the time women spend at home. So we really need to change that mindset. And especially if you have a boy and a girl, right, these kids need to be treated equally, if it's not fairly. The girls shouldn't be given more heavier work than boys, right? Boys as well need to be involved even in household. Why can they not cook? Because this is a life skill. It's not just like girls, because you move at certain point, they'll move by themselves, but you need to have that life skill even when you're by yourself. You should be able to survive. Cook for yourself, healthy meal so that you survive. You can't, your livelihood can't depend on a different gender to clean for you, to cook for you, even your own area, that you say somebody else must do that for you. I think we really need to sort of change that so that more girls are involved in education, more women are involved in more outside work, and they can work, that can pay, that can support the family together. So I think for me, that's really very important. This is where we need to start, and this is where we really need to take some of the, I don't know what's the word, that it's okay for a man to cook. It's okay for a man to take care of her children because that's what makes you a father. And I don't know, I have this feeling that our society makes it that for you to only be a father, all you need to do is pay cows. If you pay cows, it doesn't even biology. You don't even need to be biologically your child. Even though somebody give birth, conceive that child, because you pay cows automatically. We need to move beyond that thinking. And for you to be a father, you need to be much involved in the raising of your children, cooking for them, cleaning for them. It's everyone's responsibility because we are parents. So I think for me, it's that at the household level. I think Niall and then you might. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. I think it's, the local solution, I think, yes, it should start with the orientation, the ideological orientation, and the adaptation to the new environment. I know a long time ago, and the problem with us is that we think that culture is static, is something that is static, so that if your grandfather used to do ABCD, then he should be doing ABCD. It's not like that. Culture is based on the environment, the context of the time. So culture basically changes with time. And so cultural constraints are a big obstacle to climate change adaptation for sure. And so we need to be basically liberal enough. And so the idea here is that nobody should, like you said, nobody should be disadvantaged by the roles, by the gender role, not to go to school, not to find a job, not to go for skill training, for example, not to engage in activities that will enhance your individual capacity to be able to earn in the future and be able to cope and be resilient to any disaster, natural disaster like flood, climate change-induced disasters, drought, flood, and other disasters, basically. And like I said earlier, now South Sudan is a society in transition from rural setting to urban setting. And the urban setting basically demands different things for us. So in the olden days, I think things were fixed the way they are fixed. But if we bring them the way they are in town, I think there's a huge problem. And I think if we go there, that's we as a society actually are in a crisis because we are not actually conforming with time. But that's, I think, a topic for different day. But what I'm trying to emphasize on is that for us to be able to adapt to climate change, which we are experiencing now in South Sudan, I think we need to really develop both girls and boys equally, educating them equally. And if we are looking into the future, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I'm sure what we are talking about now, we're not going to talk about it if we actually emphasize on that. Because if we educate girls and boys equally, it means that they will have the capacity. 20 years from now, if a child is born today, 20 years from now, they will be able to cope. But short-term measures will involve, programming, specifically for where, like we know where women are disadvantaged. Let's say the issue of water. If we bring clean drinking water to a village that is constantly affected by drought, you are basically helping the women who are the ones who basically go long distance to fetch for that water. So that program is basically a program that is going to help women. If you bring peace between communities, you are basically going to help men who are more likely to die because of an attack from a different community. If you, for example, start to bring programs that will target women for specific related issues like what Mike was mentioning earlier about, privacy during displacement and so on and so forth. We need actually to be able to provide programs like that to help women and girls, cope with that kind of situation where they, people like when I was in the war in October 2020, like people were cooking on the street, people were sleeping on the street, and there was no toilet, there was nothing, for example. And so if we basically target programs like that are designed either by the government or by community NGOs or national NGOs or international NGOs, then we are able to basically cope with that situation. The other important factor is that, climate change mitigation measures for community. There are mitigation measures that can actually work for everybody. So, for example, climate smart agriculture can work for everybody. But along the way, you will help mostly those who are basically affected by the implications of climate change on agriculture along the road. So climate smart agriculture is one of those. So like providing early warning system, providing climate information to farmers, to agropastoralists, to cattle keepers, because if you provide early warning and you know that this place is going to be affected by crime, people are going to move to the next community. Definitely, you are helping in the sense that these people will get prepared, so they are not going to arrive unannounced. The idea is actually to initiate a dialogue. If you know there is an imminent flood, then there can be a dialogue. So that will reduce the casualties or the tension or the hostilities that will result due to displacement. So climate change, adaptation, and mitigation measures can basically be designed to integrate gender mainstreaming. And this is what I'm trying to say. If you provide dike to protect the community, the people you are going to protect the most are going to be women, basically, because they are the ones who remain home. They are the ones who rely on crop growing, the elderly, basically. So and so on and so forth. So these are the things that I think we need to emphasize on targeted programming for the people who are mostly affected by climate-induced disasters. But like I mentioned earlier, I think in South Sudan, not a lot of work has been done on how climate change affects men and women differently. And what kind of solutions should be designed for different, against different problems, for different problems. So for me, I think we actually need to start a call for some sort of comprehensive analysis, gender analysis, climate change and gender analysis on South Sudan, be able to inform policies and design policies on the basis of the evidence to target those who are really affected. But as we have already emphasized, the evidence are there because we live in this society. We observe what happened on daily basis, and on daily basis we know it's the women and children and the elderly who are affected by flood and drought, even by other disasters. I was in a refugee camp last week, in the last 3 weeks. Mostly people there are women and children. You see this, so it's all in a nutshell. It's all about the capacity of the society, and the most vulnerable ones are the women, and that's why they are the most affected by climate shocks. And so we basically need to design programs that basically help them to cope with all these shocks. Thank you. Over to you.
Let me see if you can hear me now.
Yes.
Can any of you hear me? Okay, I had to change devices. Thank you very much, Niall, for what you brought forward. Just to reiterate some of the questions that I was trying to put forward was part of the reason that climate change impacts us a lot is because of our relationship with the natural resources, right? So for instance, when we are cattle keepers, cattle rely on nature for their survival. What are the different things that we can start putting into the mindset of a lot of the cattle keepers, because that resource would die if there is no water, for instance? How do we start shifting that part? Do we look at maybe, instead of constantly migrating, moving from place to place, perhaps start creating highlands where you have the cattle on and have hafirs, big hafirs that are built and filled with water, so that there is some kind of shared water for the cattle to drink. And then also looking at the fact that when you move further, you also move into other cattle community who are trying to have that same water. So perhaps if we have more hafirs, these are things that I was trying to put forward to some of you. And also the issue of social safety nets, right? When you don't have any savings or anything like that, the moment a natural disaster affects you, that is it. The resource you rely on is the animals or the plants. Any natural disaster destroys that. And you find that you don't have any income, you don't have any safety net, nothing to help you cushion that impact. So I wanted us to look at simple solutions, such as savings, or being able to have silos, or those we have the traditional grain storage that people build from the hats, right? The problem with that is that we have our humidity is very high. So most of the time when people save their grain in any of those small granary hats, they start rotting. So they lose that part. How do we look at solutions that improve the type of silos, the type of home granary people have? Instead of those ones, maybe a community has a huge grain silo where all of them take their grains to it, that is well structured. Things that some of us who keep sending money to people back home, we can think of how is that money used by a community to actually have those safety nets, right? And instead of constantly getting water from the river, how do we have water tanks in some of these places so that when there are issues of flooding, people have some kind of resource, especially for drinking water? The other water, you can boil it, try to sieve it, but especially for drinking water. So those were questions, those were some of the comments that I was putting forward to all of you. And I think Nyamach was about to go with a bit of explanation. So Nyamach, you can come through.
Thank you, Census, and welcome back from that issue that was cutting your voice. Of course, cattle keeping and farming, most of our communities are doing it in a subsistent manner. And when it's subsistent, that means they're just keeping it for their food, just within the family. But for us to solve this issue, and the problem with this one is during disasters, whatever little that you have is just gone. For case of cattle keeping, if you have a breakout of diseases, and they just all die, it happens. You are left with nothing. So I think to solve this issue in the face of climate change that is bringing a lot of issues, the rural people should now be enlightened or otherwise educated to now move into commercialized way of keeping their cattle. Like we can have ranches, where you're keeping cattle either for their meat production or either for dairy production. When it's dairy, you have a lot of ways, and it's now upon the country if we have where we can have post-harvest technologies. Like in the village, they make the yogurt, from those calabashes and the milk. They make it, but it's just for eating at home. They get out, they extract the ghee from the milk or even the butter, but it's not in a commercialized way. I know one time in our village in Ulang, I see how our grandmothers were doing that, extracting the butter and later on turning it also into a ghee, So this practices are already there, and if they're improved, they will actually earn them some income, which will reduce all the issues that they get during the time of disasters. For this issue to stop the issue of moving from one place to another, or rather it's called nomadism, we can have zero grazing, where you have lands that are just designated for grazing, and those ones actually you'll actually plant the hay and these other grasses. The hay can be dried, and kept for those times where there's no enough water. This one can help from moving from one place to another, and it will actually enhance even the nutrition of their cattle that they're keeping. That's one. Number two, as I said, there are a lot like to stop from moving from one place to another. These cattle actually they produce a lot of manure, which can be a very good source of energy. You can actually get biogas from there. I saw projects in Kenya where you just have one cow in your house or two, you feed them well and use the manure as a source of energy, which is going to produce the biogas that is actually in villages. We visited one lady in Limuru, and she was actually supplying it to their neighborhoods. That natural gas, which is from biogas from the west of 2012, I also went to China and visited the village where they had biogas, and it was actually integrated, agriculture. We can have this integrated agriculture where we are having kettles, we are having a farmland, and we are having the household at the same place. This one reduces the pressure on natural resources, and it also reduces, the load on women. You have cows, you have your crops, you have your house. You can also have a small fish pond somewhere. This one is integrated agriculture, So the manure from the cattle, cows, goats, it's actually used as a fertilizer in your farmland, which will increase your crop production. And then we have the byproducts from the crops, are used as a feeder for your crops. You can see this. And then when you're having a fish pond along there, you can recycle this water, and also the manure from the cattle can also be used as a feed for the fish. So what we need in our rural areas, and this one will take a lot of effort from the government, locally that these rural people have to be, their capacity has to be built. Those already practices that they have traditionally on how to preserve their food, on how, to do their things have to be improved, and actually you bring into the current technologies, on how to preserve their food. We have a way of preserving food, like during the time of when there is abundance of fish. You have seen we have dry fish, and it's actually across South Sudan. They actually dry it in so many different ways, but these ways do not last for long. You will find after some few months the fish get attacked by these worms and these other things. But if these activities are actually increased, it will keep this produce for a longer time, which can take them up to the times where there are no abundance of resources. So what we need actually to move from there is we need to commercialize the whole thing. We have ranches, we have farmlands that are not just subsistence, but for commercial purposes that can actually save the safety net that you're talking about will come from here. Because when I have a farm and I have in mind the ideology of making money out of that, then I will make money. We will have something that will keep. When the droughts come or the floods come, the family will actually have something that can make them move from one place to another. Because most of the people who are now trapped in the flood areas trying to look for higher grounds, if they had saving, most of them would have moved to towns. Maybe in Tuau, most of them would have moved to Malakal, where their children will also access education and also access health facilities. Most of them would have come to Juba. But because they never had saving, they relied almost 100% on natural resources. Now they're trapped. So we need to educate them how to improve on those practices that they already have. We need to educate them and change their mindset from just looking at cattle as, we're just going to use it for marrying, and then, or maybe I have 100 heads of cattle or 1,000, and you find yourself you're the richest person in that town, while just in a minute or in a second you can lose all that one and you're brought into nothing. So we have to change their mindset, because most of these things are in the villages. Even in town, we are having, and to address this issue of, we normally have conflict between the herders and the farmers. And this conflict, we're going to solve it through having a zero grazing, having places designated for grazing. I think that way we would actually solve the issue. We need strong legislations that have to be in place, because we have laws, we have everything, but if we don't enforce them also and implement what is there, if you just leave these people to just stay the way they are, it's going to be a big challenge. So we need policies, legislations that are also going to put women, because now we are talking of women and climate change. Women are actually known naturally that they're friends to nature, because of these roles. I know that I go far. If we spoil the nature, I will actually go farther to look for firewood or to look for water. And that one will bring us that women will always care for the nature, because if I have a forest next to me and I sustain it, that forest will sustain me, will reduce the amount of energy that I will put in to go and look for these resources. It will actually reduce my risk of being raped or being killed when I'm going to look for water. So it will actually give me, because I know the pain, that if no water, it is me to look for the water. So that one will give me will give me the capability and capacity, and also the desire to actually conserve that forest that is next to me, or that water body that is next to me. So I think women also have to free themselves from, from traditional boundaries.
Thank you.
And I think, yes, I think there's more to be said on the first one, but let's go on. I'll come in later.
Thank you.
After
Thank you
Back to you.
very much, Nyamach. Yeah, thank you very much, Nyamach. Nianton, I'm going to also have you give your brief understanding. I think so. We are looking at both local solutions. You mentioned the issue of households and changes of gender norms in the household as some of the local solutions. Another important part of local solutions is looking at legislations, which is what Nyamach was bringing in. And the part that I think we didn't tap into was also how do we decrease the impact of flooding, for instance, whether it's construction of dikes or things like that, because we don't want everyone to leave their homeland in search of better areas when we can find solutions to change things in their homeland. The truth is also, for those who move or have to leave their homeland because of flooding, some of them would never find a place that's really home, and so they would end up coming there later. How do we decrease the need to even do the move in the first place? These might be interventions that are required from government or that other bodies have, that I think it will be good for us to also look at how do we make sure that people don't even need to do this process? How do we decrease the impact of people becoming climate refugees? Welcome, Nianton.
Thank you. I think that's actually where I was, where my thinking was leading into. And I think hearing from what Nyamai said and what Niall said, I think what we need as well, even within the ruler, we need is development, right? And now, in light of the climate change we're facing, is basically green or smart development within the rural area. And one of the problem why rural area are very much affected, right, is the type of infrastructure that are set up in the rural area. And if you look at what is really a house in the rural area, right, these are thatch houses with the mud and poles and sticks. Those things are very unstable when even small flooding will completely destroy them. Compared to if a house in Juba that is made of brick or metals, those ones are much stronger that they can withstand flooding. So I think one way is to really change the way we build our houses in the rural setting and try to introduce much more stable houses. And I know the rural area, they might have limitation in terms of access to materials to build, but there are some community that even simple design where the houses, basically they are poles that are raising the type of houses, so that the house doesn't start from the ground, but it starts somewhere in the air. And I've seen cases where when there's flooding, the water is just flowing underneath the house while all the property and the people are protected. So that, I think, for where we are with the limited resources and with the limited material the rural community have, that design is something that can be replicated in other community. All we need to maybe are the supporting poles that need to be made with sustainable materials so that it doesn't rot during flooding. So that's one. The second, I think, and the bigger area we can really improve or even stop people from migrating is the fact that is the adaptation. This adaptation, we need to build mechanisms that actually block water overflowing in the first place. And we know that now, especially in the area that are flooding, it's very much involved where rivers are overflowing because the amount of rainfall or the amount of water is increasing there, and there, let's say, River Nile or other rivers. And because this area are in a low-lying area, the water is overflowing. So what we could do as well, there are mechanisms that we can build to make sure that we either divert that water and store it somewhere where we can construct an artificial dam where we can capture those water and store them and then use them during dry season. Or actually we can raise the bank of the river to make sure that the water doesn't flow in the lying areas. So there's a lot of adaptation that we could do that can actually help the community to be affected by flooding. And this is something as well, something that can either be done by the community or the states or even as well the government when we talk of adaptation. So this is what comes into mind, and I'll give it to Niall or Nyamat if they want to add any comment on that, because I know we are running out of time.
All right. Yes, we are talking of mitigation and adaptation. These are words that you will always find in climate change, and they're actually different. Mitigation, we are actually talking on avoidance mechanism or reducing or actually stopping the catastrophe from happening. While adaptation, it's already in place that we cannot stop it anymore, but we just want to cope and how to actually live with it. So we are talking of the floods, Nianton mentioned of, having all those things in place. But I think also our meteorological department have to be strengthened, improved, because it's through this that early warning are given to people, to either evacuate the place or also to put other measures in place for them to be able to cope with whatever is going to come in the future. Our meteorological department is actually neglected, if I can say, and we don't have early warning that the communities will put in place when they are enlightened earlier. They can actually have, like, maybe build the dikes as we are talking, or else as a government, the government can also decide to have, like in lowlands, have even like artificial lakes, where all the water will get in, and then it flows to the river Nile, and that one can happen only when we are warned early enough that in the next 2 years or in the next 5 years, we're going to have flooding in these certain areas. And that one will also help in putting a certain amount of money or finances, put onto that area so much so that we are going to deal with all this, be it in the times of evacuation or, helping the communities to put their resilience, or else even adapt to crops that are climate resilient, So these are things that we need, and the meteorological department has to be empowered, We also need to have, like, in times of droughts, just not talking of floods only, in times of droughts, I see when it's raining in Juba, we have a lot of water that goes into West that is not harvested. This rainwater can be harvested. We can have reservoirs, we can have dams, water ponds where when it rains, all this water gathers somewhere in a place. This water actually, if it's not treated, it can be used for agriculture, for irrigation. It can be used also for our livestock, and this one will help also having this issue of zero grazing, because when we have water somewhere in dams, this is just rainwater that is usually lost, that just goes to the underground or else evaporate. Can make use of that water harvesting scheme that can help us further have clean water, because this water can be treated and it can actually be used for drinking. If not treated, it will be used for so many things, irrigation and other things for livestock. So we need such program that will actually improve on how we harvest the water. Like in Juba now, it will rain, a lot of water is lost, and tomorrow we are the same people who are waiting for the harvest to bring us water at homes, while we had a lot of water, a lot of millimeters of water that have just gone like that, So we need to have, we have what it takes for us, to move forward and to also adapt to these climate issues. I think that way, early warning, having water harvesting scheme, along other educative or education programs, that is, people don't know climate change. Many people still think climate change is not real, They think it's just a talk. When we talk about it, they tell me, this is just normal. There's nothing that is normal. The heat you're crying that it's very hot, it's not normal. The rain that is coming is not normal. So there is also need for climate change education. That these people have to know what is climate change, how is it affecting different groups of people, how is it affecting different genders, and what are the roles of each of them or each person to play in actually combating this catastrophe of our time. So as low as the lowest and the grassroots, people need to go, and they need to know climate change, even if it will be translating it in our mother tongues or different languages.
Yeah.
That climate. Thank you so much. Back to you.
Okay, Niall, I think we are over our time. So if you would like to comment, and so that we can conclude our session.
Okay, thank you very much. I think what we are talking, when we talk about gender and climate change, is basically we are talking about people, how climate change affects people, especially people who are vulnerable. Because we zoom in on who is affected by gender, But let me also, because we are commenting on solutions, and solutions in the context of South Sudan, we'll have to look at how we are affected by different disasters. So flood, we are affected by flood from different directions, from the Ethiopian Islands through the Sobat and its tributaries, and from Uganda through the Nile, Y Nile in particular, and from Bargaza River system. And for us to really address the flooding effectively, to protect the vulnerable people like women and children and elderly and those that we have really identified in this discussion as the most vulnerable ones, is to really actually come up with a series of infrastructure projects that will ensure that we really reduce the flow of water into South Sudan from Ethiopia, from Uganda, and from the Bargaza River system by developing, constructing dams inside Uganda and also inside South Sudan, so that we hold back excess water during the years of flooding, like the last 3 years, and release the amount of water that is enough that will be safely passing through the river. I think that's one major project, which I think is not easy to do. For the government to really address the issue of flooding, the government should look into this issue, and the government should mobilize resources internally, and also mobilize stakeholders, communities that could also be affected by the dams upstream. Communities basically are affected, so that these one there is a buy-in, and also from the region like Uganda, because if we build a dam in Uganda, especially Lake Albert is a natural reservoir. When we put the dam there at the mouth of Lake Albert, it means a lot of water that comes here to destroy the communities will be stored there at Lake Albert, and it's an Ugandan territory, and that could be a shared project because it can be used for the protection of the flood protection basically, and it can also be used for energy, for electricity generation. These dams were proposed long time ago by the British actually, and these ideas can be revisited. So like the Pula Dam, which is inside South Sudan, Bedan, which is also inside South Sudan. These dams were proposed, and they can be designed to act as electricity generating projects, and also as flood protection projects. The same thing, another dam could be built also upstream in Bargaza River system, on the River, on the Lol, and other rivers to also hold water back. Like this year, Bentio area was the most affected. I don't mean this year, actually last year, 2021. And it was affected because of the rainfall in the Bargaza River system, rainfall upstream in Uganda. So the White Nile, the Bar Al Jabal section, was basically spilling over into the Bargaza River system, and so there was not even a flow from Bargaza River from Bentio. So there was even a backflow because of that. So we could also build another dam inside Uganda, inside Ethiopia on the Baro River, to reduce the huge flow of water that is coming from upstream from Uganda. So these are long-term projects that if the government is serious, they can be done in the next 5 years. They can be done, and they can considerably reduce the impact of flooding. And by building this dam, we will actually be addressing the impacts on the vulnerable groups that we have been talking about, the women and children and the elderly, because these are the people who are most affected. But not only that, when you look at the impacts of climate change, it destroys the economies. So it's just that there are groups that are more vulnerable. But so the issue of addressing climate change is an issue of development, like Nianton said earlier. It's about development. It's water management issue. So managing water properly, I think, is the solution. And if we manage our water properly, like we build dams to hold back during the high flood, the high rivers, we'll be able to considerably reduce the risk of flood. If we build water reservoirs for the years of drought, we will also reduce the risk of drought on our vulnerable groups and on development. We will also can also build the irrigation system for agriculture so that we can plant anytime we want. We can also build a seed system that can do well during the flood and during the drought. So all these things are the adaptation measures that we talk about. So to me, the issue of adaptation is an issue of good water management system. So water can be an hazard if it is mismanaged. Like in our case now, it is an hazard now because it is being mismanaged, because we don't have the capacity to manage it, the capacity to build dams, and even the capacity for financial, for political. You need the political will. You also need the political muscles for you to actually build massive projects like that that may affect the interests of some countries. So these are things that we really need to think about seriously. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Niall, for giving us your adaptation measures, and Nyamaj for the mitigation measures. And with a lot of the discussion that we brought forward, a lot of it has a part that relies on our government taking the initiative and pushing forward with some of these development projects, which Nianton so rightly stated. Another part of it is also understanding the importance of the resources we have, right? So we have some of the best arable land in the world, and through projects that bring cooperatives together, where we have irrigation measures, as Niall mentioned, as well as storage, granary storage. One of the largest issues that agriculture communities have is lack of storage for their crops. Where we have that, we will limit the amount of waste and the amount of food that we throw away because they've all gone rotten. In terms of the fishing, for instance, if we have fridges that we use or we're able to dry them properly and transport them across the regions, we would actually make a change in helping communities build safety nets. And that's, I think, one of the most important part is that we want people to start becoming a bit more self-reliant and also able to survive all of these different disasters. A very big part of it that I want to also put forward is the need for peace. South Sudan is currently in war. We have conflicts in some of the regions. We have a lot of conflicts that lead to death, and we have conflicts related to cattle keeper movements into regions that agriculture. When there is no peace at home, it's impossible for people to think strategically, or even for people to stay home, because home is not safe anymore. So I am going to start concluding now. I wonder if any of you want to make some concluding remarks before we shut down. Nyathon, do you want to say something in 1 minute or two, Nyamaj?
Yes. No, I just wanted to there's one thing I just wanted to add into our recommendations, and that is the role of media in terms of reporting, right? As we've just mentioned that, and media are always among the first responders who, when there's a climate disaster, and they report it to us. So we read it in most of the cases in the news, unless if you're researchers. So I think there's a need for them as well to provide a to provide, like, when they do their reporting, they need to report what are the impact on women, what are the impact of men, the girls, and the boys, so that for those who wants to inform their program, for those who want to do research, it's easier to target what are the problem. But if everything, I'm trying to get the word, but the word is not coming out, so I'm just going to leave it there. But so when we do analysis, we need to really look at the different aspect or the different layers of the community. So I'll stop here.
Do you mean data-driven research?
No, what is the word, Niall? I think Niall help me out here.
What's the meaning?
Yeah, disaggregated data. That's exactly the word I'm looking for. I think this is the time now we need to get off this so that we can start having some coffee. But yeah, this is what I just wanted to add.
All right, Nyamachi, your turn.
Right. Yes, my last recommendation would be like we need transparency in all the aspects, and this one will come in even in reporting. You know, people are forced to report sometimes false information or misinform people, or actually the reality will not be accepted. So we need transparency even as we discuss or as we tackle the issue of climate change and gender. Just allow me 1 minute. Someone asked if there is environmental policy. Can I answer that? Yes,
Yes,
we
go
do
ahead.
have. Yeah, we do have National Environment Policy 2016, but apparently the environmental bill is still stuck in the parliament for the last how many years? It was tried in 2011, 2013, and again in 2015, and it's still there up to now. It's not actually enacted into a law. So we have the policy 2016, and there is a need for formation. Still, this one, there's a need for formation of EMA, which is the Environment Management Authority, which is actually included in the 2018 peace agreement, the revitalized peace agreement. This is one body that is supposed to be established and is not yet established. So for those who are asking for our policies, we have the policy 2016, but the bill is still in the parliament, and EMA is not formed. EMA is just like NEMA in Kenya, National Environment Management Authority, which regulates most of the things. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Nyamaj, for putting that forward. And for those who have been asking, I want to have all of you understand that this discussion is conducted through the South Sudan Women Intellectual Forum, and our discussion today was on gender and the impact of climate change on gender. These are also recorded, which means you can always go back and listen to them. One important part too is that for us to fully understand the impact of gender, the impact of climate change on other parts of livelihoods in South Sudan, we need data-driven research. And this data-driven research has to be conducted using the correct policies, the correct laws and systems, so that we are able to fully analyze what are the real impacts, which areas are most at risk, and who are the groups that are working in it, so that we start working together. There is a need to bring all the information together under one system so that the mapping is conducted through a cohesive manner. And to all those who are listening, where you can and where you can make a change, please do so. We know that people are affected a lot by both drought and flooding in South Sudan. We have seen it. We have seen the impact it has had when new communities move into other land, and that there are a lot of conflict, intercommunal conflict that has risen through that. We urge our government, the government of South Sudan, to start taking all of these mitigation adaptation measures seriously. Ministry of Environment has submitted all their documentation to the climate change group, including COP26, which means that the world knows that we put solutions forward and that we want to do something as South Sudan. We need to see this in action. And the most important part is for government to take it seriously. If we do not do something about it now, we will all become climate refugees in South Sudan. To everyone who has joined us from America, North, South, from Australia, from our regions in the various parts of Africa, we thank you all for coming to join us. I want to thank our different moderator, the different teams that we've had, Nianton Hothmai, Nyamaj, Hoth, and Nyaltit Mamer. Thank you all today. I hope you all have a beautiful Saturday, and we hope to see you again. Issues to do with environment are never complete, and for that, we might have more series of discussion. This is Census Lolion coming to you all from the cold parts of the United States. Thank you for coming today. We hope to see you again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye. Thank you.